It came about, the Five Deeps came about because the guy called Victor Vescovo wanted to dive the deepest place in every ocean. By the time I got involved, he was already halfway through a design of a submarine that could do that. He had already purchased a vessel and was starting to look at refitting it. And as they were talking with the sub guys and the expedition leaders and the TV crew, they were saying, well, this is a great opportunity for science. And I guess one of the guys looked around, asked around, and said, we need a scientist for a real deep diving expedition. Who do you recommend? And 5 years ago, I'd written a book on the Hadal Zone, which I think is the only book on the matter for the last 50 years or something. They came across this book and went, who's this guy? And literally just called me up one day and said, completely out of the blue, and said, this is what we're doing. Could you do anything with this? And I said, well, of course. And I said, okay, are you in? I said, okay. As simple as that.
And of course, most importantly, you yourself got the opportunity to actually go down in the sub.
Yeah, so I had opportunity to go down in the sub. My first real dive was Java Trench, 7,300 meters. That was absolutely wonderful. It was just an incredible experience. My second proper dive was to 10,700 meters in the Mariana Trench. Again, that was a great, wonderful opportunity. My third dive was to 7,200 meters in the Puerto Rico Trench in the Atlantic. My last dive was a little shallow one, a little 2,500 meters in the Arctic. Which is great. So when I started this, I was always under the impression there wouldn't be a scientist in the submarine. It was all very much that these guys had to do whatever they had to do, and it was actually quite early on. I think they changed their mind and said, it'll be kind of good to get you in there because you're the only guy on the boat who knows what they're looking at. So, and I was like, okay, fine, don't tell the wife, but yeah.
Fantastic. So you went to the various places. Were there distinct differences?
There are no two trenches the same. They're all different. You can tell quite quickly, or I can anyway. I can look at the sub-bridges and I can tell you what that seafloor, where that seafloor is. I can tell you that's Tonga, that's Puerto Rico, that's Malloy. They are quite different. The characteristics.
Probably the only person on the planet that can do that.
Possibly the only person that could do that. But it depends what you're looking for. So a lot of people who have come before us have described the deepest place in the world as a desert, as this sort of lifeless, barren place that's harsh and all this. It's not. When you look at the seafloor, what I see, when you see tracks and burrows and little mounds, and it might not be immediately visually gratifying. It's not like, wow, there's a big octopus. But when you look and all the signs are there, this seafloor is alive with life, and the actual deepest point tends to be the not so interesting bit. It's on the slopes. So the deepest point is always going to be kind of flat because it's the bottom of the pond. What we were doing was the owner would go down and do his deep dive, and then when there was a second dive, the science dive, we would say, okay, we don't want to go to the deep point, can we go a little bit up the wall? And once you start getting off that and you find the rocks and the crevasses and all these things, it completely opens up and your perspective completely changes. There's so much more down there than just a flat sedimented bottom. That's a very naive take on it, I think.
And you managed to collect samples as well?
Yeah, we collected just unbelievable volumes of samples. I mean, the real workhorses in this were the landers, but because they had to be there anyway, we built a science lander around them. So we were using small baited traps, which gives us a whole bunch of crustacean samples, which we've been using for years. They're really good model taxa. Plus we had larger traps, plus we had baited cameras, plus the sub has a manipulator arm which can collect sediment and rock samples and things like that. So we've got a real wealth of it, plus water samples and CDT data. And it's been huge. It's quite daunting now when you look at the sample cupboard and you see how much we've actually collected. The Five Deeps expedition is a sampling exercise. It's about bagging samples, getting video. We've got something like 25 terabytes worth of video to be analysed now. There hasn't been time to keep up because when we did the first in Puerto Rico, we had to be in Uruguay 3 weeks later, and once we were finished in Cape Town, we had to be in Australia 3 weeks later. There wasn't time to analyse any of this stuff. So the science really starts now. Now that it's all finished, now everything's now back in the UK, it's all secure, the frozen samples are now happy and still frozen, thankfully, and everything's backed up, and now we can get into it. But the real hardcore science is going to take 2 or 3 years, maybe even more, to get through.
And for those that might be looking at this expecting to see some of the spectacular footage, of course, that's still under wraps for the time being.
Yeah, so the whole expedition was filmed for our TV series. It's going to be a 5-part series that goes out on Discovery Channel. I've heard the end of this year, possibly beginning of next year. Each episode will be about each ocean. So you'll get a chance to see some of the best footage from the sub, the best footage from the lander, and the whole thing will be intertwined with the story of how we got there and all the ups and downs of each expedition and some of the characters involved and in the context of that whole ocean rather than just a particular trench. So I haven't seen any of it yet, but it should be interesting.
And for somebody like yourself, kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but that actually isn't the case for you, is it?
The once-in-a-lifetime opportunity thing, I'm starting to change my mind, because now we've done it, it's led to various other things. I mean, nothing will be quite the same. I don't think we'll ever go around the world again, but there are lots of people around there of similar sort of ilk who have got an appetite for paying resident scientists to come out and do all the crazy exploration stuff that modern research councils wouldn't touch. I think it's a whole new way of doing science and exploration, which is it's great, but I don't think it's not the job for one guy. we need a crack team of people who are willing to go on strange boats for a long period of time.
So you're happy to share it?
I'm happy to share it, yeah, definitely. Yeah.